Okay. So Vista primes are out, and then Vista ones short lived, and then Vista Ps came out. What was the Vista P? What differentiated it from before?
So to get in past Vista 1, or even with Vista 1, we have to talk about what makes an image altered or what makes it vintage in a sense. Everybody's throwing around, including manufacturers, like, oh, it's the vintage look. It's, I've tried very hard to come up with acronyms that aren't vintage, but, unsuccessfully so. But, but the look of a vintage lens, if you think about it, we're talking about inefficient glass. We're talking about lenses that don't transmit as much light. They possibly do funky things with light rays that don't refocus on the sensor, such as chromatic aberration. But what you're looking at is fundamentally you're looking at generally a warmer coating, because that's what those lead-based coatings did. And also you're talking about a drop in contrast. And there's multiple ways to look at that, but veiling glare is primarily the term where it's just creating a cast of kind of like looks like log, right? Like over your image, dropping the overall contrast. So you're looking at contrast, you're looking at coating colors, and then also you're looking at depending on the age, spherical designs where there are no spheric elements. So spherical elements are perfectly like a sphere, right? A half sphere. And uh, uh, Aspheric elements are they're spherical, then they go flat at the edge, and the reason for that is correcting the optics. So older lenses, you tend to see you were starting to image more of that spherical without correcting at the edges, and what that looks like if you use it inside of the format intended format is it just gives a little bit of a not so much swirly effect, kind of like that, where you're just it's like if you're looking through the edges of a port window or something, it distorts it a little bit.
Right, right.
So that's the look that's why people love Coke Speed Panchros. That's why they love some of the K35s, and although that's more flare driven look, but yeah, that's kind of the idea is that you've got flare color, you've got contrast, and reduced resolution, which enables kind of like a diffusion filter of sorts that cuts down on fine detail resolution because it's just not resolving that. So those are the things. So with Vista 1, our goal was to take that flare component and kick that in there to do that. Um, Vista P, what we did was if you take the elements, and a lot of rental companies have done this quite simply, if you pop the back off of Vista Prime on the mount, you can put some little shims in there and you take the spacing elements and you move them out. Now, if you have lenses that are designed for spherical for a certain edge crispiness, if you've got that and then you push it apart, well, what are you doing? You're imaging more of the edge of the elements. And so it creates spherical distortion. So spherical distortion is that swirly kind of bokeh look. And that's exactly what we did with Vista P. The only reason that Tokina made Vista P is because multiple rental companies and customers were saying, I'd really like a Tokina Vista with air gaps, as we call it, where you spaced out the elements, but I don't want to do it myself and I don't want to pay a premium for somebody that's modifying them already. Because there are companies that have popped up that modify the Vistas, and that's essentially what's happening there. Some key differences and certainly mechanical upgrades and other things going on with more expensive options. But primarily, that's the only reason we came out with Vista P. So you're targeting spherical distortion there.
And then I mean, we're kind of glossing over things, but just try to get the initial information out there to spur questions on what people might ask. So now we now have Vista C, and what did Vista C do? And if you have, oh, hello Vista C.
There it is. Yeah. You can even see the front element is like red and blue. So Vista C, what it was a this goes back about 6 years. We were continuing to see requests for modification of the Vistas, and we realized that the air gap thing we did with the Vista P and that a lot of other companies were doing, uh, really that was like the simplest thing that you could do. And what people were actually wanting is they were talking about spherical distortion, but actually what they were after was more fall off, which is how the lens transitions from the center to the edge. And lenses that are very, very good at fall off is Cook lenses have wonderful fall off. They roll gently, and that's really a function of the spacing of the elements as well as the yeah the transition of resolution from edge to center. So that's really what we were after, people were after. So I talked to a lot of DPs, I talked to a lot of rental companies. I'm not going to say every rental company in the world, but probably close to it. And like just to find out what it was they were looking for, you know, ask them what's hot, what do people really want, what are they renting, and what are they renting once, and then what are they renting again? You know, to see, because a lot of times that'll tell you, you know, like the production originally went with Cook Speed Pancros, and then it drove them nuts, so they went with, you know, some other lens. So basically, then I was able to pull data on what was actually being rented for various music videos, productions, this sort of thing. So what lenses are actually being rented, and then we looked at the actual footage, if we could, from those scenes to figure out what the look actually driven and what they liked about it and how the DP used it. And then out of all of that, we were able to, and significant input from rental companies, we were able to create the Vista C. So Vista C is a complete reboot of all of the coatings. That is something that no third-party company could do. We did, these are not a lazy modification of, you know, because the Vista P arguably is a fairly, it was custom demand, but really we're just adding some shims. A lot of them that no rental company could do, but still not there. So what we were after with Vista C was we modeled it after two vintage lenses specifically. So we took our elements and completely replaced a handful of elements in there. So there are very few lens elements that the Vistas actually have, Vista C actually has in common with the other focal lengths. And we changed the coating completely through, including in sealed groups. So it is a red and blue flare, which the flare was intentionally modeled after the K35. And I know a lot of there have been companies, Canon, you know, tried to make an analogy of their Sumi-Ray lenses to K35s, which it definitely was not. You know, it had a green flare. So there were a number of things that that we were targeting, and we were able to do all of it. So the fall off very, very closely matches what you love about a Cook lens, the older ones like the Speed Pancro. The flare is what people want to see in a K35 type flare, and the image coverage is, you know, 65 mil on some of the longer, you know, 35 and up. T1.5, which I really pity the focus puller that even has to deal with T1.5 on an Alexa 65. You know, I don't think that's a thing, but its potential is there for complete disaster because that's like a gnat's eyelash. So, but this is all related to Vista C. So,